curious to hear what you think the value of silent sitting is.
We have to define silence. Sitting is clear. Silence, there are three kinds. There is physical silence, the absence of sound. In other words, you're not talking. There is another form of silence that would be, for instance, the absence of thoughts. And there finally another form of silence, which is a real silence, which is simply the absence of the belief or the feeling to be a separate entity. So, the first two types of silence don't define meditation for me. It is only the third type that defines meditation. And in fact, it is a sufficient condition for meditation. Sitting is not a necessary condition for meditation. So the absence of the belief or of the feeling to be a separate entity is a necessary and sufficient condition for meditation. But there are different definitions of meditation. But that's the one which is the most important one in my view. Now, another definition would be doing something in order to achieve the kind of meditation I was talking about. And another possible definition would be, since consciousness is already the absolute universal reality, all beings are in constant meditation whether they are aware of it or not. You follow me? So it depends how we define meditation. So going back to sitting in silence could be part of the true meditation, sitting in silence without the belief or the feeling to be a separate entity. Now, this feeling or belief to be a separate entity can be temporarily absent, momentarily absent, if you will, momentarily absent, or it can be annihilated. In other words, definitely absent. If it is definitely absent, meditation is natural, is our natural state. If it is momentarily absent, this type of meditation is one way to lead to the annihilation of this sense of separation. The best way, the best prescription for this type of meditation would be the welcoming of the flow of thoughts and bodily sensations and external sense perceptions without trying to interfere with them, with indifference, beholding them with indifference. In other words, letting them appear, letting them unfold, letting them vanish. And usually that is done during the sitting meditation. Why? Because it's easier to achieve that while preventing any physical activity of the body, just as on the thought level, this approach to meditation prevents any interference with the flow of thoughts. In other words, there is some kind of, it's not suited for daily life that may require physical activity and mental activity. You see, if you are working, you need some continuity in the line of thought. So it is somehow an artificial exercise, but which almost immediately leads to meditation, in that sense that it momentarily suspends the belief and the feeling to be a separate entity. Because the feeling, when it is simply observed, reveals itself for what it truly is, which is bodily sensations, the feeling to be separate, the feeling to be. And the thought to be separate, when they are simply contemplated with detachment, they are simply concepts. They cease to be beliefs. A belief is a concept to which we are attached, right? With some kind of attachment to it. If a thought is simply allowed to evolve and we are simply indifferent to it, then it cannot become a belief. So then, that in this way, this approach easily places us in this type of meditation in which there is this, at least, temporary suspension of the belief and the feeling to be a limited entity. So my answer is a little complicated, and the reason is that the word meditation is confusing, because when we talk about it, there are as many types of meditations almost as there are spiritual schools.
Perfect. Okay, so what I can kind of take from this, and you can tell me how on base or off base I am here, but when we sit silently, I'll put that in air quotes, implied is the first type of silence, the physical silence, which helps us maybe to back away from the interference of our thoughts. So
physical silence in and by itself, but we place ourselves in an absence of activity. So speaking would be a kind of activity, just as moving. As in moving our tongue and our lips is a movement, right?
Or reading a book, there's movement there. Or
yes, so we simplify, in other words, the context to facilitate this contemplation with this benevolent and indifferent beholding of the flow of mentations.
Right. Like we give ourselves a better shot at not interfering, and the non-interfering is what perhaps leads to the third type of silence, which is the silence of the belief to be a separate entity.
The moment the belief and the feeling to be separate is suspended, we are in meditation.
Right.
In other words, for as long as it lasts, it's perfect. So that's why it's very important for us to have the right understanding of what meditation is, because meditation is not a state of bliss. It's not a blissful body or a blissful mind. It is a state in which the sense and the belief to be separate and limited is simply not present. As this state, in this state, the bliss, the happiness, which is inherent in the background, or reveals itself, will reveal itself. But perhaps not right away. That which is the most important is a state of peace. If we are not subjected to the belief to be a separate entity, there is peace. The only party pooper is this belief and this feeling. So if this feeling and belief is not present at all, that's perfect meditation. And this approach to meditation, if you will, is a trick that enables us to easily take our stand as consciousness, nothing else. The problem is that if there is a sense of lack which is present, and therefore no peace, it means that we are not contemplating the flow of thoughts and bodily sensations with benevolent indifference. Because this sense of lack, we are not indifferent to it. Because we grant it power. We grant it truth. This sense of lack, if we investigate it, will reveal itself to be bodily sensations. At that moment, we distance ourselves as consciousness from this perceived object. So it's a case of discrimination, if you will, in the Indian sense, viveka, or of neti. I'm not this, I am something else than this bodily sensation. So often this approach is misunderstood because people who try this approach, they are not thorough with it. In other words, that they are benevolently indifferent only up to a point. The point is when the sense of lack appears, and instead of being investigated for what it is, bodily sensations, belief systems, whatever that is, because it's one or the other or both, unless it is investigated, it will deprive us from this benevolent indifference.